Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys. And it's your turn to hold the protest sign.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We're
Right
here. Okay. And we are still protesting to defund the IRS because taxpayers matter. All taxpayers, all Americans, both sides of the political aisle.
Yes.
Everybody benefits if we defund the IRS,
Yes.
right? And we can defund the IRS by passing the fair tax.
Yes, getting rid of the income tax and passing the fair tax. I've always wanted to do this. I'm going to do it this time. And we need you to help us out.
Yeah, that's right. There you go.
Got right at you. All
Good.
right. Well, I tell you what, we were supposed to mention Thanksgiving last week, and we didn't. Hardly did we?
We hope. Yeah, we did forget that, didn't we?
Yeah, well.
Well, we apologize. We hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving in spite of some of the state governors.
Well, we just had so much stuff to cover last week, and we got a lot to cover this week as well.
Yeah, and I had the sticky note right there on my computer, too, and still forgot it.
Yeah, but one thing we need to follow up on. Last week
we had a dual senior moment.
Yeah, we talked last week a bit about the governor in Mississippi at least having the foresight now of thinking, well, I'd like to get rid of the state's income tax. He has not put forth any kind of proposal to what he'd replace it with, although Alabama right next door again is working on a fair tax style, state tax to replace their income tax. Texas has never had an income tax. And if they do what Jade Wally says and implement a fair tax to replace their property tax system, that'll be pretty cool. But again, we mentioned that if you were in Mississippi and you'd like to get involved in helping that idea go through, we looked it up. We should have done it right then. On FAIRtax.org, there's a list of all the state leaders. And there's only one gentleman listed for Mississippi. His name is Alan Ramsey. There's no email address there. There is a phone number, which we're not going to give out on the air. If you want to call him, you can look up his number on FAIRtax.org. But we would encourage folks in Mississippi to get behind the governor and tell him, hey, that's a good idea. Have you thought about what you want to replace it with? Oh, if you haven't, here's one that works really well.
This is a real advantage to the people who live in Mississippi because the governor is starting the idea. Sometimes the governor is one of the last people to be convinced. And this guy is creating the whole movement here, you might say.
That works.
So that's a great advantage for those of you in Mississippi.
Now, hopefully it won't be like the guy in Illinois who called a progressive income tax a fair tax when it really wasn't. We won't go there anymore. That was defeated.
Yeah, but, and the taxpayers saw through that. We got some comments from Illinois, too. And they weren't very generous towards the Illinois governor. They did not like his quote-unquote fair tax, which was not fair because it was a graduated income tax, and they shot that down.
He did note that people voted that down because they don't trust the government. Well, he did get that right.
Yeah.
But whatever. If you're in Mississippi, you can get a hold of Alan Ramsey. Look up his phone number on the FAIRtax.org site under State Leaders. Up at the top, it says, let me scroll back here to the top so I'll tell you exactly what it says. Under Get Involved, there's a little menu across the top. Mouse over Get Involved, and you'll open up a little menu under that. And State Leaders List is the first thing under there. Okay. Grassroots Corner.
Well, we don't really have one because this program is airing right at, is after Thanksgiving during Thanksgiving week, so everybody's taking a break. But normally Jim Bennett does a grassroots corner. He's been concentrating on some of the great volunteers around the country and highlighting their efforts and so forth. Please, if you have some information about a volunteer yourself, anybody else, contact Jim at jim.bennett@fairtax.org. Bennett has 2 N's and 2 T's. And send him the information because it's great to let everybody know about some of these volunteers. And it's inspiring, too.
Yeah.
I mean, the one from last week, that guy, Victor, he's all over the place in 2 different states trying to get the fair tax going.
I was glad to see him do Bob Scarborough a couple of weeks ago, too.
Yeah,
that's
that
the
was
guy
great.
who's working on getting the FAIRtax Power Radio show on as many terrestrial radio stations as possible. We certainly appreciate that. And hopefully we'll have a new station here to announce, or new stations to announce shortly.
I hope so.
And we'll work on it.
And so along with the Grassroots Corner, you get the Chairman's Report, and you get a quick update on FAIRtax Power Radio. You get those by going to fairtax.org and signing up. Give them your contact information. You will not get spam when you give them your contact information. They never sell or share your information. But that's a good way to keep up with our efforts, so we encourage you to do that.
Okay, that means we've got more time than usual to devote to the meat and potatoes subject line that we have chosen for today's FAIRtax Power Radio show. And of course, the evils of the income tax, the evils of the IRS as an agency, that's something that we beat on for a long time. But we have been noticing as well that people, and Steve just noticed this in his latest chairman's report, or recent chairman's report, people have no idea how much the income tax system actually costs them.
That's
well,
right.
I can look on my income tax return and see how much tax I paid. Well, that is just not the whole story.
No, it's not by a long shot.
We have got to tell, as Paul Harvey would say,
the rest of the story
about why the income tax is so injurious to your economic health, why it would be in your best interest to jerk it out by the roots, get rid of it, and replace it with a fair tax. One of the things, you see these books we have, the FAIRtax books, we call them the white one and the red one. I was looking in this white one the other day, and chapter 4 just caught my eye. One of the reasons we haven't talked about specifically in quite a while here on FAIRtax Power already, the cost of compliance. And so I'm not going to sit here and read the whole chapter to you, but there's some stuff in here that if you do not have a copy of the FAIRtax book, I would suggest you get a hold of one some way, somehow, and read what this is all about. Do the white one first and then the red one. But the cost of compliance, imagine if it's going to, I not only have to pay the government 15, 20, whatever the percentage is of my income, I have to spend a lot of other money on top of that to make sure that I jump through all the proper hoops to get him to pay that. So out of my pocket is the tax liability and a lot of compliance costs, which for small business is usually a lot more than the tax liability itself.
Now, this book was written in 2005, so some of the information may be dated, but the concepts are the same. They talk about individuals, okay? Individuals paying their income tax. Well, it's drawn out of your paycheck on a regular basis, so forth. The payroll tax is sent in, supposedly going to cover Social Security and Medicare. It doesn't really do that anymore. But as far as the income tax, then the end of the year comes, April 15th rolls along, and you have to get all these records together to file your tax return. And the more complicated your income situation, your income and expenditures is, the longer it's going to take. If you keep records during the year, that helps. But that's taking a certain amount of your time. Okay, if you wait till the last minute and then excitedly run around trying to find receipts and so forth, all right. Now, Bob and I have reached a point in our lives. Our finances are very simple. My wife and I don't own property up in northern New York. We don't have another business. None of that stuff. We're retired people. We get a retirement income. That's it. Pretty boring. And so our taxes are pretty boring too. But you have families that are coming up and so forth, and they may own some rental property. They may do this. They may have college expenses. So those tax returns are a little more involved. All right. Okay. For an individual, it's bad enough. What happens for businesses?
Businesses get to pass all that along. But, they have to hire accountants. They have to hire tax attorneys, like accountants like Jade Wally, tax attorneys like Steve for covering tax attorneys. And so, guys, we're not picking on you, but we're just saying those guys don't come cheap. They are highly trained. They know what they're doing. Their advice and their services are worth every dime you pay for it, no doubt about that. But again, that is all costs that get passed on to the consumers.
Yeah.
But you
that's
mentioned
right.
something earlier. I wanted to touch on this one. This is something when you talk about how much the compliance cost. You're talking about, what it costs the time to do your record keeping. The time, it's billions and billions of dollars that it says that they are spending on this. Again, this is right out of Chapter 4, the FAIRtax book. We talked about the Tax Foundation last week.
Yeah.
They show the number of man hours, the total cost for individual compliance cost at $194 billion.
Wow.
And remember that information is 15 years old now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is another cost that doesn't often come to people's minds when we talk about the compliance costs associated with the tax system, and that's an opportunity cost. And the best illustration of an opportunity cost I can give you is also taken right out of the book. You mentioned that every week or every 2 weeks, every month, however often people get their paychecks, their tax money is withheld from them. The government grabs a big chunk of it right off the top before you even get it. But what would happen if the government didn't do that, and instead of taking that money from you, it was put in an account, an interest-bearing account in your name? So you were able to get all of your money. You still had to pay the same amount of taxes, but you could keep the money that you pay them with until it's actually due. And they said that if you put that in there, let's see, here we go, I'm on page 46, back up. What would happen if you could do that? For example,
so if you put the money, if you were able to put it in a savings account and draw interest instead of sending it to Uncle Sam.
Let me read from the book here right quick. If in 2002, and again that was almost 20 years ago, taxpayers had been allowed to keep their money until it was due, and if they had invested that money in completely safe and secure T-bills. So rather than getting your withholding withheld from you, you still don't, in effect, bring it home. You just put it in this account. Tax-paying Americans would have pocketed nearly $24 billion in interest payments. That's $24 billion. It could have been in your pocket, but it wasn't, because you didn't have the opportunity to put that money in that account for you. That's an opportunity cost.
Yeah.
And they are staggering.
That's amazing.
That's just for individuals. Imagine what opportunity costs for businesses are.
Yeah.
I know that my brother is self-employed. Every quarter he has to estimate his tax liability and send that in. What if instead of sending it into the IRS, he was allowed to put it in an investment of some kind, and then at the end of the year he could draw out the money, but he would still get the interest on that investment all over the year. So instead of making an interest-free loan to the government through withholding, you make an interest-bearing loan to yourself.
Yeah. Yep. And it adds up. Believe me, it adds up. The other aspect is the lack of stability of the tax code. We mentioned, at this point, as we're recording, we still don't know who the president is going to be next year. Okay. President Trump is challenging the process and so on. So businesses can't plan. Right? Is the tax level going to stay the same? Is Mr. Biden going to get in there and try to raise taxes? Are the Democrats going to get the House and the Senate? Okay, because if they do, taxes will go up. Okay, or are the Republicans going to keep the Senate? All this is up in the air. So businesses cannot plan. What are we going to do next year? We have no idea. So things stay the same. Maybe the market has been good and maybe there's an opportunity for them to expand their business. Are they going to do it? No, because they don't know what's going to happen.
I've got to quote another excerpt out of the book here. For several years, the Tax Foundation, and we mentioned them, they are nonpartisan, non-ideological. The Tax Foundation has calculated the costs of complying with the increasingly complicated federal tax code. They estimated that in 2002, again almost 20 years ago, individuals, businesses, and nonprofits spent 5.8 billion, with a B, billion hours complying with the tax code, an effort that cost an estimated $194 billion. Now you think about that, 5.8 billion hours. That's a long time.
Yeah.
If the average life expectancy is 76 years, then the 5.8 billion hours it takes to comply with the tax code in 1 year would equal the combined lifetimes of 8,700 Americans.
8,700 people?
That's what it says.
Wow.
That's how long. And here's another way to look at it. It says, what kind of workforce would it take
There you go.
to cover those 5.8 billion hours? If you figure a standard work week, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week with some time off for vacation, that adds up to a workforce of more than 2.77 million people. If you had a workforce whose only job was to do all this compliance work, it would take 2.77 million people. And the board points out that's more people than work in the auto industry, the computer manufacturing industry, the aircraft manufacturing industry, talk radio, and the steel industry combined.
Wow. Well, that's
So
now.
can you imagine how big the industry would be if it takes that many people to just do the work of complying with the tax code?
Yeah.
Are you convinced yet we need to get rid of this thing?
Yeah.
Oh.
This is more ammunition. All right. These are more reasons why the income tax is so inefficient. All right. It's just a terrible way to collect taxes.
Yeah.
And the fair tax is a much, much better way. But why do we tolerate the income tax?
Yeah.
Why does Congress tax corporations?
I don't know. Well, this says the Tax Foundation again sets you straight. About 52.8% of tax compliance costs are directly paid by business, which gets passed on to us.
Yeah.
Another 2.8% paid by the nation's nonprofit organizations. That leaves 44.8% paid for by you.
Yeah. Plus, you go back to the
52.8% of the compliance costs are directly paid by business, and then those costs are passed on to consumers.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Any cost to a business is paid for by people. We went over this last week, all right? And we've talked about it time and time again on FAIRtax Power Radio, okay? Business expenses are passed on to their customers, their shareholders, and their employees. There are never any exceptions, all right? It's one of the three or all three, okay? But it's always people that pay for the business expenses. So really, they should take those two figures and combine them.
Yep.
That over 90% of the expenses, are borne by people, Americans, citizens. So
I would encourage you to get this book. I would imagine that there are used copies available on Amazon or some other place where you can get a book from. But there is just an amazing amount of information in the white book, and then it's refined a bit in the red book.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to read that and figure out. And I guarantee you, if you read this book and you don't become an active volunteer in the fair tax movement, then you're just dead. That's all it is.
Don't hold back, Bob. Tell us how you think.
I did, but I'll tell you what. So not only the tax law, but the compliance costs. Why do we have a system that lets that happen?
Yeah. And why do we have a system in which it allows the people in Congress to play class warfare? All right. They talk about, the corporations need to pay their fair share, and we dwelled on this. Although we didn't leave enough time for ourselves last week.
Okay, well, we got time. We got plenty of time this week.
Yeah. So we talked about this last week. The costs borne by a business are reflected in the price of their product or service. All right, or they're borne by their employees or their shareholders, okay? So whatever it takes to run a business, the raw materials, the building rent, the electricity to run the machines, the computers, the clerical work, all that stuff, the benefits to the workers, all right? All those things get rolled into the cost of their product and service. So it's always primarily their customers that pay for those. All right. And sometimes if they can't raise their prices on the customers, then they have to reduce expenses, which means usually they cut labor costs.
Which means they lay people off.
Yep.
Or people don't get the raises that they think they should get.
Or the shareholders don't get as much, and then the shareholders aren't happy either, okay? So, but in every circumstance, those costs are borne by people. So if you have a business that's running smoothly, they've got their expenses, they've got their profit coming, their income coming in, they're making a certain amount of profit, and then the government raises taxes.
Yep,
the government raises taxes, and that throws a monkey wrench. So now they got to make up for it, okay? If they're in a tight market and they can't increase their prices, then they have to save money somewhere else, okay? Now, a lot of people will say, well, they just don't need to make a profit.
Yeah. Do you know what's really insidious about this whole income payroll tax system?
What's that?
Is that the Congress critters use it to enrich themselves.
Well, they do, yeah.
Do they ever more? They give a tax break to one, and we look in this Congress.gov, we've seen over the past year, tax break after tax break after tax break after tax break for certain particular individuals or certain purposes. When somebody gets a tax break, somebody else has to pay for it. And then actually and also you'll get these proposed tax increases, but then at the same time, the Congress critters will sell people, exemptions on how to avoid it.
Another point
they are lining their pockets left and right by making it more complicated for you and me to mess with this thing.
Yeah, that's why we say that the tax code is written by millionaires for millionaires. But there's another point that Bort's made in that book. He's talking about how the cost to a business, including the cost of taxes, are always borne by people. So the point is, well, why have corporate taxes? Why don't we just, since people are paying for it one way or the other, why don't we just, put the tax on individuals? And he said the reason, deception. All right. Yep. By talking about a corporate tax, you generate this wealth envy, this corporate envy. There are some people that think all corporations are evil.
Yeah.
My wife and I formed a corporation. We aren't particularly evil, okay?
I don't know. But back to the original thing. People have no idea. Deception and obfuscation, whatever it is, that the folks do not want you to know how much the tax system is costing you.
That's it.
How much are you paying in increased prices?
Yeah.
People, businesses passing on their tax liability, their compliance costs to you. You can look on your tax form and see what you paid in taxes, but you have no idea when you buy something at the store, how much of the price of that store, how much of the price of that item is tax costs being passed on to you. They've done study. It's around 22%.
Yeah, and it changes from one industry to the other, but the average is about 22%. In other words,
but you don't see that on your receipt.
Every product and service that you purchase, every new product and service that you purchase, on average, is 22% more expensive because of the income tax. Think about that. Everything, all right, from the soda straws and napkins for the kitchen to a new car. Everything is on average 22% more expensive because of the tax code, because of the taxes and the compliance costs.
What happens to prices if all those components get taken out of the price? If they no longer have the tax liability, business no longer has the compliance costs to deal with, the cost of doing business does what?
Goes way down. Now, if we go to the FAIRtax, when we go to the FAIRtax,
there you go.
The compliance costs for individual drop to zero. I mean, there's no tax returns. There's no record keeping required. You can do record keeping if you want to, but it's up to you. For businesses, they're going to drop like 80 or 90%, okay? But compliance costs, keeping up with the tax code, reporting, filing, reporting, hiring professionals to help you, all right? For individuals, zero. For corporations, it's going to drop 80 to 90%. That's a big deal, and that means all.
Yeah, but those greedy corporations just keep that savings for themselves.
Oh yeah, because somehow when the fair tax passes, we enter an alternate universe where there's no competition, and the corporations can do whatever they want, and they can charge whatever they want, and they don't have to worry about other corporations competing with them. Yeah.
Where's your little buzzer with the X on it that we had a while back? That was fun.
No, that's not going to happen, all right? Corporations may use lobbyists to get around the tax code, to get benefits for themselves, but they cannot avoid competitive market forces. Competitive market forces. If you're in the business of making widgets and there's other companies out there making widgets, you got to pay attention to what they're doing and what they're charging for their widgets, all right? And you have to stay competitive.
And all it takes is one company within an industry to decide, I'm going to pass this savings along and get a bigger market share for myself.
Yeah.
Then everybody else says, oh, probably, doggone it, they caught us. We can't do that.
Yeah.
Everybody has to follow suit. The airline industry is just amazing. If one airline makes a move, how fast the rest of the airlines just do the same thing. Whether it's implementing fees, getting rid of certain fees, or whatever. Mm-hmm. The competitive pressures in a free market just would not allow a greedy corporation to keep all of that savings for themselves.
Yeah.
So if this sounds like a good idea, go to fairtax.org, watch the whiteboard, see how it works, and then if you like it, join us. I'm gonna steal Steve's little spiel there at the end of his parents' reports.
Yeah. Yep.
And
yep. So
we haven't mentioned PopVox in a while.
That's right. Yep. POPVOX.com. It's a great website. When you go there, they'll ask you to join by giving them your address, okay? Now, they do that because then they'll know what congressional district you're in, and they'll know who your representative is and who your state senators are, okay? Then you can look up any legislation such as, let's see, H.R. 25. How's that? Okay.
That's a good one.
And you can make comments. You can vote, whether you're in favor of it or opposed to it. And of course, everybody watching this and listening to the podcast is going to be in favor of the fair tax, H.R. 25.
It's got like about a 95% approval rating on PopVox.
And we need more people weighing in on it too. There's like Bob says, we have tremendous percentage of approval, but we need more numbers. Okay,
we're probably gonna have to wait till January to just do it again when everything starts.
Yeah,
over.
That's right. It'll start over again. But you can also, and again, wait till January. It doesn't hurt if they do it now. But
that's true.
This can be practice, and then do it again in January when HR 25 is resubmitted. But you can also make comments about it. All right, it'll give you the opportunity to write why you're in favor of the fair tax. So you can type out your comments and so forth. Your comments will go to your representative, okay, for HR 25.
Every last one of them has at least one staff person dedicated to keeping an eye on that. Yeah. So they want to know what the hot buttons are and how hot they are. And what are people talking about and how many responses is a particular issue generating.
That's right.
And the squeakiest wheels get the most grease.
And you can go to the other tax plans and tell them why it's a terrible idea. All right. Okay. What else? Write letters to the editor. This is good. I mean, you don't have to be a 40-year expert on tax analysis, tax policy. Okay. If you like the fair tax, that's good enough. You can tell people you like the fair tax. You learned about it from the FAIRtax Guys on social media and so forth, and FAIRtax Power Radio, and then you can send everybody to us. Okay.
And don't try to explain all of it in 250 words.
Yeah, that's right.
That's not going to happen.
One or two concepts. Okay.
One more quickie. The FAIRtax store.
Take a scrolling banner to your next town hall, assuming they start to have town halls.
And that's it. Do that. And so again, until next time, we appreciate you joining and watching and listening. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
FAIRtax Guys reminding you that the fair tax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are the
FAIRtax Guys.
Coming at you from so many different directions, you're going to have to get hit by one of them.
Well, here's what he means by that, okay? FAIRtax Power Radio can be found on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Parler, Gab, Instagram, Periscope. Where else?
And if you've got the online podcast, it's Spreaker, iHeartRadio. We're on Facebook Live every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. We've got a YouTube channel. Apple Podcasts. And we are on, at the moment, 3 terrestrial radio stations. WTOB in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, WLSC in Laura, South Carolina, and WAME in Statesville. So if you live in any of those areas, you can listen over the air. But all 3 of those places stream online, so you can catch us on Sunday morning on the radio stations as well.
And let's not forget our website, FAIRtaxGuys.com. So plenty of places to find us.
All right. And until we meet again, reminding you that the fair tax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.